The first thing she said was,
Don't listen to the other dispatcher.
I actually looked over my shoulder. It was almost 3 in the morning, and I was working the night shift alone. There wasn't another dispatcher, just me. I figured she was confused. 911. What's the address of your emergency? She answered immediately.
I already gave it to him.
I checked the call log. The call had been connected for less than 20 seconds. No previous calls, no transfers, nothing. Ma'am, I still need your address, she sighed.
Why do you keep asking me everything twice?
That was the first moment something felt off. I asked, is the person you're hiding from still inside the house? She whispered.
The older dispatcher already asked.
I looked around the room again. Empty. Every station, every chair. I said, Ma'am, you're only talking to me. She answered.
No, you're the younger one.
At that point, I stopped following protocol. I asked something completely unrelated. What's your first name? She ignored me. Instead, she said,
No, the bedroom window doesn't open.
I frowned. I hadn't mentioned the window. 5 seconds later, without thinking, I asked, Can you get out through the bedroom window? She quietly replied, See, I didn't say anything. I just stared at my screen. A few seconds later, she whispered.
He's telling me not to tell you.
I asked, Who's telling you? No answer. Then she said,
You're about to hear 3 knocks.
3 seconds later, someone knocked on a dispatch room door. 3 slow knocks. I checked the security monitor. The hallway was empty. When I put the headset back on, she was crying, trying not to make a sound. Then she whispered.
Inside.
I asked, Who? She answered.
Not a man in my house.
A pause. The one with you. I turned around. Nobody. The line went silent. Not disconnected, just silent. Officers reached the address a few minutes later. The woman was alive. She was alone. Every door was locked from the inside. Every window was locked. No sign anyone else had been there. One of the officers asked why she'd called 911. She looked confused. Then she said,
Because the older dispatcher told me to.
The officer replied, There wasn't an older dispatcher. She simply answered,
This.
There was. 2 days later, I asked to hear the recording. The technician loaded the file. Everything sounded exactly the way I remembered, until he suddenly paused it. He backed the recording up a few seconds and turned the volume all the way up. At first, I couldn't hear anything. Then I heard it. A man's voice, very quiet, almost impossible to notice. He wasn't talking to the woman. He was quietly saying every question, about a second before I asked it. The technician replayed it 3 times. Then he looked at me. Who was sitting next to you? I said, No one. He checked the shift schedule anyway. 1 dispatcher, 1 headset, 1 logged in workstation, just me. He closed the recording. Neither of us said anything. Right before I left, he quietly said, Play the last 10 seconds. I did. The woman wasn't crying anymore. She sounded calm, almost relieved. Then she quietly said,
Thank you.
A short pause. Then one last sentence.
Both of you.
The first call came in at 2:14 in the morning. A woman was whispering so quietly that a dispatcher had to press one side of her headset against her ear.
Please, I need help.
The dispatcher asked what had happened. Instead of answering, the woman gave an address, and then she lowered her voice even further.
I don't think they know I'm still here.
Who doesn't know? The woman stopped breathing for a moment. At least that was how it sounded. Then the call disconnected. Officers reached the address in less than 6 minutes. The house existed, but no one had lived there for nearly a decade. Weeds covered most of the yard. Several windows were broken, and the front door hung partly open. The officers announced themselves before entering. No one answered. They searched the kitchen, both bedrooms, the attic, and the basement. There was no furniture apart from a damaged table and an old mattress frame. Nothing suggesting that anyone had been hiding there. Dispatch tried calling the number back. The automated message said it was not in service. By sunrise, the incident had been classified as a false emergency call. The next night, at almost the exact same time, a woman called again. The same dispatcher answered. The woman sounded more frightened now, but she was still whispering, "Please don't hang up. I won't. Tell me where you are." She gave the same address. Officers were sent before the dispatcher even finished entering it. "Are you inside the house?" A long silence followed. Then the woman said,
They still haven't found me.
"Who are you hiding from?" The dispatcher heard something move in the background. It sounded like wood bending under someone's weight. The woman inhaled sharply.
I have to go.
The call ended. Police returned to the property. This time, they searched slowly. One officer checked the walls for hollow spaces, while another examined the floors with a flashlight. At the end of the upstairs hallway, they noticed a section where the dust looked different. There were no footprints, but the floorboards there were cleaner, as though something heavy had covered them for years and had recently been moved. When one officer stepped closer, the rotten wood broke beneath him. His leg went through the floor. He was not seriously injured, but while the others helped him up, his flashlight illuminated something inside the narrow space below, a small metal box. It had been wrapped in a plastic bag that had almost completely disintegrated. Inside was an old black flip phone. The battery was missing. There was no SIM card. Dry mud had hardened inside the charging port. Nobody cleaned it or tried to switch it on. It was placed directly into an evidence bag. The phone was sent to a forensic lab the following morning. Investigators did not expect to recover much from it, but the serial number was still readable. Carrier records linked it to a woman who had once lived in the house. For the first time, detectives believed they had identified the caller. Then they found her death certificate. She had died 8 years earlier. The detective assumed the records had been mixed up. He requested the original file himself. The fingerprints matched. The dental records matched. Her family had identified the body. There had never been any question about who she was. She had been buried 8 years before the first call was received. The laboratory continued examining the form. Although it could no longer be powered normally, technicians managed to access part of its internal memory. There were no photographs, no message, no saved contacts. They recovered only the call history, 2 outgoing calls. Both were to 911. Both timestamps matched the calls received from the abandoned house. The lead detective looked at the phone. Before the detective could respond, his own phone rang. It was dispatch. The woman had called again. Same voice, same address. The detective asked exactly what she had said. The dispatcher read it back from her notes.
I knew you'd find the phone.
There had been a short pause. Then the woman had added,
You're still too late.
Police searched the house for a third time. They brought thermal cameras, metal detectors, and equipment used to inspect the ground beneath the property. They found no hidden rooms, no remains, no evidence that anyone had entered the building since the previous search. The investigation remained open, but there was nowhere else to take it. The house was demolished several months later. The floorboards, walls, and foundation were removed. The land was cleared. Nothing was discovered beneath it. For almost 2 years, there were no more calls. Then shortly after 2 in the morning, a veteran dispatcher answered a silent line. At first, she heard only breathing. Then a woman whispered,
Please, I need help.
The dispatcher checked the address displayed in the incident history. She recognized it immediately. Mine. The house was demolished 2 years ago. The woman said nothing. There isn't a house there anymore. After several seconds, she answered.
I know.
The dispatcher stared at the empty property shown on the most recent map. There's nothing there. The woman's voice became calm.
Not for you.
Another silence followed. Then she whispered.
I'm still waiting.
Faint sound came through the line. Wood creaking beneath someone's feet. And before the dispatcher could speak again, the woman asked,
Will you send someone this time?
Every 911 dispatcher remembers one call they never forget. For John Harper, it happened on October 14th, 2003. At 11:41 p.m., a woman whispered into 911.
There's a man outside my house.
John immediately asked if she was safe. Are your doors locked?
Yes.
Has he threatened you? A long pause.
No.
That's what's scaring me. She said the man had been standing across the street for nearly 40 minutes. Not walking, not hiding, just staring at her house. John asked if she knew him.
No.
Has he tried to come inside?
No.
He told her to stay away from the windows, keep every door locked, and wait inside. Then he said the words every frightened caller hopes to hear. I'm sending officers now, she quietly replied.
Thank you.
The call ended. For John, it was just another dispatch, or at least that's how he remembered it. 21 years later, investigators began digitizing backup recordings from the county's old 911 system. Most of the tapes contained routine emergencies. Then they found hers. Nothing about the recordings seemed unusual. A frightened woman, a calm dispatcher, a promise that help was on the way. The problem came afterward. There was no dispatch record, no responding officer, no evidence that anyone had ever been sent. Investigators assumed the records had been lost. Then they interviewed John Harper. He listened to the recording without saying a word. When it ended, he nodded. That's me. Do you remember this call? Yes. Did you dispatch officers? Absolutely. They told him there was no record. John frowned, not because he doubted himself, because he didn't understand. I remember entering the address. I remember pressing dispatch. I remember telling her help was coming. He sat quietly for a moment, then said, if nobody showed up, something happened after I sent them. Investigators eventually located the woman. When they asked if she remembered calling 911, she hesitated.
I remember the man. They played the recording.
She listened to the entire call, then looked up.
That's my voice.
So, you remember? She slowly shook her head.
I remember looking at him. I remember being terrified. I don't remember calling anyone.
She remembered the man clearly. He had appeared outside her house several nights over the course of 2 weeks. He never approached the property, never spoke, never even looked away from the house. In the final night, she became certain something was about to happen. According to the recording, that was the night she called 911. Detectives spoke with the neighbors. 3 of them remembered the same man. One remembered the white pickup truck. Another remembered seeing the woman pacing through her house with a cordless phone in her hand. A third remembered hearing her yell.
Please, just hurry.
The man was real. The truck was real. The fear was real. The only thing investigators couldn't find was the police response. The truck eventually led them to its owner. He had died years earlier. When detectives showed his daughter the address, she recognized it immediately. He used to park there all the time. She said she'd asked him why more than once. He always gave the same answer. "I'm waiting for someone." He never said who. John Harper was interviewed again. By then, investigators had confirmed there was no dispatch log and no responding officer connected to the call. They asked him one final time, "Are you certain you sent help?" He answered without hesitation, "Yes." "How can you be so sure?" John looked down for a moment, then quietly said, "Because I remember thinking I got to her before he did." Months later, detectives uncovered something they hadn't seen before. One of the neighbors had kept a journal. Most of the entry described an ordinary morning. Then one sentence stood out. "The white truck was still outside when I left after sunrise." The call had ended just before midnight. Hours later, the truck was still there. Investigators visited the woman one last time. They showed her their journal. She read the scenes once, then nodded. "You saw him that morning?"
Yes.
"Why didn't you leave?" She looked at the detective for several seconds before answering.
Because the dispatcher told me help was already on the way.
The case was eventually closed. The original 911 recording still exists. John Harper has never changed his story. He insists he dispatched officers the moment the call ended. The woman has never changed hers. She remembers every detail about the man outside her house. The only thing she has never remembered is calling 911. 3 neighbors independently confirmed seeing the white pickup that night. One journal entry confirms it remained outside until sunrise. No one has ever explained why no officer arrived. No one has ever explained why no dispatch record exists. And after more than 20 years, the only person who never doubted help was coming was the woman who spent the entire night waiting for it.